I look at this monkey.
Oh yes, my favorite short-tempered monkey. Arguably the biggest letdown in the series, Yumigahama Hikaru, the Traitor, is a unique character who's based on real-life fighter, Fabricio Werdum. Werdum is a sportsman who has achieved accolades in the world of Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, and Muay Thai, and has competed in MMA promotions such as the UFC, Strikeforce, Jungle Fight, and Pride. Does Yumigahama live up to his inspiration, or was he just another primitive ape? Let's find out. After Kanoi Ajito resigned as the 5th Fang, Katara Mitsuda nominated Yumigahama, an up-and-coming rookie from his bodyguard unit, to carry the torch as the 6th Fang. During his tenure in the Kengen Association, he was considered by other fighters to be as strong as Kanoi Ajito. However, at some undisclosed point during his reign, Yumigahama made contact with Purgatory. Whether he met a fellow fighter or Toyoda Idemitsu himself, he was made an offer with greater conditions. After considering this offer, he decided to abandon his title and join Purgatory, by first going rogue and killing a member of the bodyguards. In the main story of Omega, Yamashita, alongside Gao Ryuki, Jose Kanzaki, and Narusima Koga were scouting out a C-list Purgatory promotion until stumbling across Yumigahama, who was flanked by Lucien and Nicolas Le Banard. He considers the Kengen Association as his stepping stone, all the while provoking Jose into a fight. Narusima Koga de-escalates the situation, but Yumigahama infuriates both Jose and Ryuki by sucker punching their friend in the liver. Before a brawl between these two was to begin, Toyoda Idemitsu reprimands Yumigahama's behavior and settles peace between the men. The next time we see Yumigahama is after his inevitable conflict with Jose, in which Yumigahama's arm was broken and Jose was beaten to the point of nearly dying. This prompted SJPW to cede from the Kengen vs Purgatory tournament, under the notion that they needed to fill in for Jose. During the tournament itself, Yumigahama was prevented from facing Gao Lang Wang's Wat due to one of Carlos Medel's insanely quick jabs. Ultimately, in the 4th round of the tournament, he was lured out by Misasa, the current Fang of Mitsudo, and the rest is history. Number 1. Yumigahama's build. Himuro's assertion that Yumigahama was just as strong as Kanoi Ajito doesn't mean the power of his techniques and the way he used them were equivalent, but that they had the same build. Yumigahama is definitely on the bigger side of most Kengen characters. Although height in this manga is notoriously inconsistent, he is characterized as towering over Misasa and is constantly emphasized as being much taller than Jose, so he should be held in high regard in terms of build. Number 2. Techniques. In terms of techniques, Yumigahama has an affinity towards hand-to-hand weapon-like combat, in which he uses his body to imitate swords, knives, spears, and what have you. The other characters that have taken this unique approach are Jerry Tyson and Kuruki Gensai. This ensures that he has a wide arsenal of attacks and many effective means of subduing his opponents. Apart from this, he has shown a wide variety of kicks and has taken the sign towards pushing his opponents with arm thrusts like that of a Rikishi, a strategy he may have devised after entering Purgatory to account for ring outs. All in all, Yumigahama's arsenal is practical for what it needs to achieve, and his speciality gives him lots of options. These are Yumigahama's most remarkable merits. Now we must talk about his weaknesses, and there are very major ones. Number 1. Yumigahama is weak to soft techniques. This is clearly emphasized with his fight with Misasa when he utilizes his Silat to parry all of Yumigahama's strikes, then knock him off balance and counterattack with a variety of hard elbow strikes. This is due to Yumigahama being very large, and mainly a striker. making him more prone to overextending himself, and given both Misasa's smaller body and skill at deflecting or outright curbing Yumigahama strikes, he is at a big disadvantage, even considering the unusual rules of the mats. Number 2. Yumigahama's grappling is not up to par. Before Misasa got past his Sorma kicks, Yumigahama relied on his grappling as a last-ditch resort, but Misasa advanced past it with a single exchange. This could explain why he never thought of it as an option earlier in the mats, because his grappling isn't great. This could also account for why he lost his arm while fighting Jose, who I would like to remind you, happens to be a wrestler. By the looks of it, the elbow portion is twisted. Although I do not call myself a martial artist, nor am I much of an enthusiast, I can infer that Jose used a Kimura. A Kimura is a submission hold which centers around locking an opponent's shoulder with both of your hands and moving your opponent's elbow across another's back, essentially twisting it. Although there are ways to get out of a Kimura, Yumigahama surely didn't. This is one of Yumigahama's major weaknesses because there are many people in the series who are amazing grapplers. Number 3. Yumigahama has poor short-range coverage. Of what we have seen of Yumigahama's arsenal, his Kamizo spearmanship seems to be the most effective at dealing with opponents at the maximum length of his reach. But in terms of short-range coverage, Yumigahama has Kokoku dual sword style, which is easily dealt with, and Sakemori quick draw, which is able to reach Misasa, but by virtue of relying on surprise, it also lost its viability. There's another option Yumigahama could have used, the sucker punch to the liver. Not only is it extremely close range, but would have caused both distraction and pain to his opponents. Two things Yumigahama desperately needed against his fight with Misasa. But since these were his last resort techniques, it is safe to say that he doesn't have an ace in the hole just yet. Number 4. Yumigahama's personality. He is hot-headed, short-sighted, and most of all, a bully. Most of his actions are done to spite others, and he is easily provoked by his opponents. Yumigahama's low temper makes him less of an asset and more of a weakness. Now that we have discussed what makes him strong and what makes him weak, we can discuss specific matchups. Just so you know, this script is very large, so please settle down and enjoy. Yumigahama Hikaru has a 9-5 record in the A-list division of Purgatory. This means he has won a total of 9 matches, but lost 5 times. Although he could have fought the same people repeatedly, that's boring. I predict those 5 fighters to be Lolong Donair, Arashiyama Jiroda, Naidon Monkabat, Liu Dongqing, and Terasi. These are heavy speculation, but are equally relevant in discussing his power. Lolong Donair is the crowned king of Purgatory and is one of the few people Yumigahama is afraid of provoking. During Toei Mudo vs Julius, Donair advises Toei to be aggressive instead of waiting to counter Julius's god-killing drill with Breeding Mountain. This may reflect on his approach to combat, preferring absolute aggression and speed to defeat his opponent before they are given a chance. If Yumigahama and Donair were to fight, Donair would immediately close the gap between them and unleash powerful blows, giving Yumigahama little room to use his spearmanship and ultimately being prone to close-range fighting. Lolong Donair probably wins. We will see what he has later. I put both of these fighters together because they are Yumigahama's kryptonite. Both of them are impressive yet unique grapplers. Jiroda utilizes the Japanese martial art of Judo, and Naidon is a genuine Mongolian wrestler. They are also incredible at using soft techniques, with Jiroda's Judo using an opponent's own weight against him, and Naidon being able to effortlessly throw fighters off balance. Yumigahama Hikaru's difficulty with soft techniques, paired with neither outstanding grappling or short-range coverage, means that he would be at both Jiroda's and Naidon's mercy when they inevitably do catch up with him. Snakes have been used in the past to symbolize great grappling talent. Liu has called himself a martial arts prodigy and is known as the Three Demon Fists serpent. With these ideas in mind, who else has great grappling talent and is also a prodigy? Aimea Cosmo. With these connections, Lu is probably Purgatory's version of him. Based on my inference, this is bad news for Yumigahama, because he isn't great at grappling or for short-range combat. Keeping distance with Lu Dongqing would only work for a certain amount of time before he inevitably reaches him. And at that point, he's finished. We haven't seen anything of Terasi. I believe he may have won simply because his record was revealed after Carlos, the Falcon, and Mudo had fought in their rounds. Carlos couldn't have defeated him because Yumigahama didn't show outward fear towards him, even after he punched out his nose. Yumigahama made a remark about how the Falcon couldn't defeat Rihito, implying that he thinks he is superior. And Toei Mudo is so physically imposing that, like Donair, Yumigahama doesn't feel like mentioning him. So, this leaves Alan Wu, Fei Wangfang, Nicholas, Lucian, and Terasi. Alan Wu doesn't count because he was completely new. Fei Wangfang is also considered fresh. He may be targeted less due to support from the other Demon Fists. Lucian said Nicholas lost to Jose, who lost to Yumigahama, so the French psychopath is out. If Lucian were to fight Yumigahama, he wouldn't use formlessness and would rely on his Wu Wang Fist instead, so Lucian might lose if this is the case. So this leaves Terasi via process of elimination. At this point, he is yet to fight. So under comfortable circumstances, and the fact that he is being kept out of the earlier matches means he is strong. This is pure speculation. Now, let's move to the Kengen Association. His record within the Kengen Association is unknown, however, based on his weaknesses to soft techniques, poor grappling skills, and difficulty in extremely close quarters, it is safe to say that during the Annihilation Tournament, he wouldn't survive past the second round. He would lose to all fighters who secured positions in the quarterfinals. These individuals being Aimea Cosmo, Oma Tokita, Wakatsuki Takeshi, Muteba Gazinga, Mikazuchi Rei, Karuki Gensai, Hatsumi Sen, and Kanoi Ajito. Same reasons for Lu Dongqing. Yumigahama is simply outgrappled. Although he is a better striker, Cosmo's zone would be able to defeat him. Even if he could perceive it, Yumigahama has no reasonable means of fending it off. This is the same with post-time skip Cosmo, except his striking can now be considered a threat and could be used as a decoy for his Jujutsu or the zone. Aimea at this point is far more well balanced and simply eclipses him. These characters are in the same category because they both specialize in soft techniques. Hatsumi Sen would be able to dodge his storm of attacks, and with Aikido would be able to pin him down and use triple strikes to end the match. If this didn't work somehow, he could always use Star Drop. Oma Takito's Nico style offers him many ways to reach his opponent. Oma has the option of redirecting his long range attacks, dodging them with Flame Kata, or tanking with Adamantine. Weeping Willow would be very effective in throwing Yumigahama off balance, and Flowing Steel is a better alternative for redirecting strikes. His grappling is also one of the best in the series because he defeated Aimea Cosmo on his own turf. Oma would be able to defeat him without using the Advance or even Demon's Bane. These two would give Yumigahama a swift defeat. Wakatsuki is bigger than him, faster than him, and much stronger than him. It would be a similar case of what I believe Donair may have done, which is to start the match aggressively, enter into close quarters, and start throwing his way in techniques against them until he surrenders, passes out, or dies. If this is the case, then he wouldn't need his grappling as a decoy into its blast core. He would simply defeat him with his full contact karate. Yumigahama would get knocked out. Muteba Gazinga's eye poke and heart jab are techniques which would either kill or defeat Yumigahama if either were to land. However, these techniques rely on surprise and are effective if one doesn't know about them. Yumigahama would be so susceptible to both of these techniques because he doesn't have any prior knowledge. Remember, Muteba is a mercenary who's only fought 3 matches in the series. Yet, there is one silver lining. Yumigahama has better range and may be able to keep Muteba at bay with his spearmanship for a period until he chooses to weather a blow. When Muteba takes this risk, this will enable him to use these techniques. Yumigahama would understand the intention of the eye poke when he sees it. This would prompt him to back down from his position, but while retreating backwards, his chest would be more susceptible to the heart stab. This is a somewhat more manageable fight for Yumigahama in the quarterfinals, but he'd still lose more times than not. Mikazuchi is too fast. Yumigahama would be unable to react to Mikazuchi's speed. However, he would definitely be able to tank a few lightning flashes. Later in the match, Mikazuchi would be pushed towards utilizing Sunfire to defeat a bigger opponent. This will stop him from moving as fast and would enable Yumigahama to predict his movements, but it would enable Mikazuchi's strikes to take more effect. This would cause Yumigahama to land some of his strikes with his spearmanship, but once Mikazuchi's invasive strikes begin to land, Yumigahama would be at a disadvantage. This would be his closest match between the people in the quarterfinals. Dude, nothing reaches Karuka Gensai, not even his maximum range attacks. Gensai has been shown to block, parry, and redirect barrages from far faster fighters than Yumigahama. As a testament to his durability, he has taken repeated blows from Kanoe Ajito, has survived Demon's Bane, and has forcibly bent his fingers back into shape after they've been broken. This is not to mention his foresight, the organ-damaging combos of the Kaiwan style, and the Devil Lance, the best example of weapon-based attack. Yumigahama is outclassed at his own game. Compared to his predecessor, he doesn't hold a candle. Kanoe Ajito with his formless could easily invade Yumigahama's effective range, dodge or withstand his attacks, and fire off quick strikes to keep Yumigahama on the ropes. But if he chose to, he could switch over to his martial arts, and take Yumigahama out with powerful, orthodox techniques used at appropriate times. Kanoe Ajito has proven to be great at grappling based on his fight with Okubo Naoya, and he has extra short-range techniques such as the Dragon Sword, which also happens to be his ace in the hole. Kanoe Ajito won't need to switch between formlessness and martial arts to regain an advantage. Yumigahama is completely overshadowed by the legacy of his predecessor. Now, let's move to Kengen matches that would be equally or a little less challenging, starting with the characters who were brought down during the second round of the Annihilation Tournament. These characters include Akoya Seisu, Career Ryan, Julius Rinhold, Sakabayu Shizun, Yorozuka Saopiang, Kiryu Satsuna, Bando Yohei, and Gaolang Longsword. This is an interesting one. Akoya Seisu, the Executioner, has superhuman reflexes which enable him to deflect and block all strikes with his powerful shield. He also utilizes these reflexes to strike during an enemy's vulnerable intervals with the Ripper. Paired with Hayami Sonka's perfect internal clock, they are able to reliably predict any foe they come across and counter them. The only grievance with this strategy is that Akoya will be waiting for Sonka's analysis, and until that point he will be forced into a defensive position and wouldn't be able to utilize his stance of suppression. If these two were to fight, Yumigahama would have free reign to go on the offensive, and when Hayami Sonka's analysis comes in, Yumigahama would be at the disadvantage only if he sticks to the same techniques. If Yumigahama were to switch from one weapon school to another, Hayami Sonka would have to go into analysis again, and Akoya would have to fight alone. During this period, Akoya would have to make decisions by himself. When this happened in the story, he tried to break all of Aimea Cosmo's ribs, and basically abandoned winning the fight altogether. Meaning, without Hayami Sonka, Akoya would lose his composure and unleash his inner madness. Due to Yumigahama's size, it would be difficult to pin him down without proper techniques, and since Yumigahama is still continuing to whittle down his shield, Akoya would lose at some point or another. This conclusion not at all represents the Akoya Seisu we were given in Kengen Omega. Akoya Seisu, after 2 years, has fully integrated his insanity and reflexes to not only predict and block an opponent's moves, but to use his shield arm to pin down his opponents and sour them with strikes. Omega Akoya would definitely not lose his focus and will advance against Yumigahama with the intent of pinning him down and throwing down the full weight of his massive fists, all the while dodging or blocking his arsenal. Although Yumigahama wouldn't win against the current Executioner of Justice, he would have won against him during the Annihilation Tournament. Curry Ryan is a complete monster. Only using his brute strength and nothing else, he could have easily gone to the quarterfinals. If Yumigahama were to face a Curry Ryan who isn't using any techniques besides the removal, Yumigahama would be able to push him around, but not harm him in any significant manner. When Ryan does use the removal, Yumigahama would be at his complete mercy. He would lose against Ryan's most basic form. In the manga we get a taste at what he could do if he attacked with a focus, and let's just say that Yumigahama should surrender. Yeah, it's that bad. Yumigahama would lose to Julius Reinhold in the same fashion he would lose to Wakatsuki or Donair. Julius is more muscular, larger and stronger than him, and he has outmatched Wakatsuki in this regard as well. Even before God-killing drill, I doubt Yumigahama would win. Julius Reinhold would knock him out with the might of German muscles. Grotesquely underrated. This was denied from happening in the story due to Sekibayashi's own self-control. Sekibayashi Jun is the greatest wrestler in the series, who is defined by his sheer tankiness, acting, and willingness to be striked. Although counterintuitive, Sekibayashi's defining attribute is that his defense isn't used to minimize damage, but to break down his opponent's form and turn their own strikes against him. Think of it like Torrance from Minecraft or Newton's third law. Although he still takes the full brunt of the damage, it gives Sekibayashi considerable control over mats, especially a prolonged one. If Yumigahama were to face Sekibayashi Jun, Yumigahama would gleefully take the opportunity to strike down his prone opponent, but would lose his temper when Sekibayashi breaks his act and fires back. Yumigahama's arsenal would be useless against him because he would take cumulative damage and doesn't have one-shot techniques like Mutaba. So Yumigahama wouldn't be able to end the match quickly. Ultimately, Sekibayashi Jun would take control of the match and finish off the broken Yumigahama with a grand suplex. Sekibayashi Jun defeats Yumigahama Hikaru with style. Saw Pang is very aggressive, headstrong, and his bones are the toughest in the story. His skull and spine can hardly be broken and he can sustain a beating. Although this is very beneficial, Saw Pang is more prone to concussions if he does lose his momentum or when invasive techniques are used. If Saw Pang faced Yumigahama, he would rush forth with his Litway boxing and begin his onslaught, but Yumigahama would be strong enough to maintain a slugfest or even push him back somewhat with his Rikishi strikes or kicks. But needless to say, Saw Pang could tank all of it. The only means of defeating him would be to use soft techniques or to target his organs. Since Yumigahama doesn't utilize either of these techniques in his actual fights, Yumigahama would lose to the Kamikaze Fighter. Kiryu Satsuna is a practitioner of the Nico style and the Koye style. Satsuna has many options of reaching his opponents, such as the Nico style footwork, or using Koye style blink to traverse the distance when his opponent blinks, making it seem like he teleported. Satsuna's main strategy of attack is to utilize the Rakshasa's palm, a twisting blow which can contort flesh and bone. Satsuna can also utilize this technique with his foot to either traverse distance better or for more power. Yumigahama would struggle to predict his movements because he doesn't know the tricks surrounding his blink, and would be defeated easily due to the lethality of the Rakshasa palm. Satsuna can defeat him solely with the Koye style and will not need the Nico style's footwork, redirection, or Fallen Demon for extra awareness. Yumigahama loses in the blink of an eye. Bando Yohei, the serial killer, is an ex-med student with abnormal flexibility, muscles, and reach. Yohei's flexibility is such that his bones can fold around strikes to grab his opponents, or it can extend his joints to increase the range and lethality of his arm whip. The only grievance with Yohei's arm whip is that the extension causes his bones to become more susceptible to locks, and is heavily reliant on the element of surprise. Yumigahama's only option is to invade Bando's effective range because Yohei can afford to stay at a distance, whereas Yumigahama cannot due to range difference. Yohei can use his arm whips to the fullest because of Yumigahama's large frame and size, making him an easier target to strike. When Yumigahama is able to use his maximum range strikes at Yohei, he would have already taken considerable damage, and because Yumigahama cannot exploit Yohei's weaknesses to locks, Yumigahama would lose and be just another victim of his. This fight nearly happened in the story. Due to Yumigahama's height and spearmanship, he can strike more efficiently at a distance than Gao Lang. The pro boxer would understand that he has a better chance and in fight, and all it would take is to parry, block, or tank one of Yumigahama's strikes to get the range that he wants. When this happens, it would be the right moment for Gao Lang to utilize his flash barrage. Yumigahama would take damage, but he could tank it or push Gao Lang out with his sumo strikes or kicks. If Gao Lang continues to dodge, weave, and invade Yumigahama's range, then he would inevitably take Yumigahama down. If Gao Lang has his evolved right fist, then any jab or straight launch by his right would deal considerably more damage to Yumigahama than before. This would simply expedite the process and enable Gao Lang to end the match quicker. Yumigahama loses to the boxing champion. Although Yumigahama won only once, there are definitely people in the Kengen Association that he can defeat. Let's move to characters that didn't make it past the first round of the Annihilation Tournament. These characters include Adam Dudley, Konoharu, Mokichi Robinson, Inabe Ryo, Moribuchi Gozo, Sawada Koizaburo, Miguro Masaki, Koizan Takeru, Karo Yoshinari, Nezu Masami, Nakata Ichiro, Nikaido Ren, Chiba Takayuki, Hanafusa Hajime, Kanada Suikichi, and Okubo Naoya. Adam Dudley's most defining detail is his raw power and enhanced trunk muscles that enable him to land heavy blows from any posture. This is especially useful when Adam is tied to the ground and isn't expected to throw a punch. However, this would be useless in an upright battle with a striker with an equivalent build. While Adam is stuck with the techniques of a rudimentary brawler, Yumigahama is far more sophisticated, and in this fight, he will be able to use his arsenal to the fullest. Adam Dudley during Omega would be a little different. Under the tutelage of Kurishi Mitsuyo, Adam began to utilize his trunk muscles to attack from uneven and unorthodox positions. With this new method in mind, Adam would stand much more of a chance against Yumigahama's arsenal, giving him the opportunity to one-up his opponent and shift momentum by launching heavy punches or kicks from otherwise awkward positions. It has only been seen in sparring matches thus far, and we haven't seen what he could do in a real match. Therefore, until we see that, Yumigahama would be able to defeat the hockey pro. The heaviest boy in the series, Konoharu weighs 315 kilograms and is unusually athletic for a guy at that weight. Although this is incredible, Haruo's weight adds a lot of strain onto his knees, making it an ideal target for many fighters. In terms of technique, he has none to speak of. He is like a child having a tantrum. However, Haruo does receive an amp to his speed and power when he enters his extreme metabolic state. If Yumigahama faced the Colossal Titan, he would have no difficulty harassing Haruo from a distance, while each time Haruo rushes in, he would waste his stamina. Yumigahama would take the lead in the match until Haruo reaches his extreme metabolic state. This would be Haruo's second wind, but the damage he would have received and the consistent strain on his knees would be emphasized more as the match goes on. This would be similar with Omega Haru. I don't believe he has changed at all while in the Japanese wrestling scene, albeit gaining more weight and tenacity. Yet the results would ultimately be the same. Yumigahama defeats the corrupt Himalayan in a battle of attrition. Robinson is a practitioner of Baritsu, a martial art with similarities to other sports such as boxing, jiu-jitsu, and judo. Although this isn't typically limited to Baritsu, Robinson also utilizes finger locks to break or dislocate fingers. In this fight, Yumigahama would have both the build and range advantage. Mokichi's boxing isn't that bad, but wouldn't be as great as Yumigahama's strikes. The only thing that could affect Yumigahama in any meaningful manner is Mokichi's judo. Finger locks would be ineffective due to his brute strength and frame. If one of his arms is locked, Yumigahama would just use the other one to push Mokichi out of the deadlock. The only reasonable means for Mokichi to regain control is to predict one of Yumigahama's strikes, grab it, and then throw him. This would harm Yumigahama, but he could take a lot of them. As long as Yumigahama continues to strike, he would surely win. The greatest decathlete in the series, Moributsu Guzo's main attribute is his raw power and speed. Although he has utilized some orthodox techniques in the story, Guzo doesn't know any martial arts. With his track experience, Guzo is able to launch the world's fastest knee from his signature crouching position. Because both their builds are largely the same, their techniques would be the deciding factor. Since Guzo is more of a brawler, Yumigahama outshines him in terms of technique. In a slugfest, Moributsu is the one who would take more damage. The only way for Guzo to win is if he got the time for his crouching position and was able to fire off his knee. But if Yumigahama is consistent and keeps striking, Moributsu won't get the moment to prepare for his ace in the hole. So, Yumigahama defeats the immeasurable. The ghost from The Grudge has something that no one else has: ranged grappling and throws. And Abe Ryo's hair is strong enough to be used as whips, blindfolds, and most importantly, as extra appendages. However, hair is hair and it can still get cut or torn off with enough power. If Yumigahama were to face the Phantom, his striking would be more enough to exceed him. When Ryo inevitably uses his hair, the only thing Yumigahama would need to do is to cut it. Remember, he can utilize his hands like they are knives. So, overwhelmingly, Yumigahama wins. Sawada Koizaburo is a ballet dancer who learned how to kick. Due to his occupation, Koizaburo has incredible balance and control. Paired with his training, he can fire powerful kicks from awkward and unusual positions. He can also amplify his power by virtue of spinning. If they were to fight against each other, they would both benefit from having range. But in this instance, Koizaburo would hold the advantage because of his flexibility, speed, and range of kicks that surpasses the complexity of Yumigahama's spearmanship due to high specialization. Although these wouldn't be enough to bridge the build difference, Koizaburo could always try spinning for extra damage. Yumigahama loses to the Bird of Darkness. Meguro Masaki is a judo practitioner who feels pleasure when damage is inflicted. If his opponent isn't wearing a gi, Meguro can still use his judo by grabbing the collarbone and arm of his opponent. If Yumigahama were to face down Meguro Masaki, Yumigahama would remain in his best interests to stay away from him and pelt him down with his strikes. Although he would feel pleasure from these attacks, Meguro Masaki will still take damage. But when Meguro gets close and launches one of his throws, Yumigahama would get mounted and would have no resistance to Meguro's madness. Yumigahama loses to the masochist. Rihito, a fan favorite and a member of the legendary Four Idiots. Although his build is nothing to scoff at, his main attribute is the Razor's Edge, the best cutting technique in the series. It can slice through steel, let alone flesh. Although this is an extremely powerful strike, one would be utilized in very close range, otherwise it requires a larger windup. If Yumigahama were to face off against this weapon imitation user, Yumigahama would be extremely wary of Razor's Edge. Although if he is able to maintain a reasonable amount of distance, Rihito's motion would be a lot larger and more predictable. Without this technique at its best, Rihito would be at Yumigahama's mercy. This would be a different story if comparing Omega Rihito. This version of his character is more orthodox and doesn't solely rely on the Razor's Edge. Under the tutelage of Kuroki Gensai, Rihito has become more strategic with this technique and can utilize this strike to turn the fight in his favor. If this version of Rihito was to fight Yumigahama, he would fare much better in an upright battle, but would still be at the disadvantage. Figuring out that he wouldn't win like this, Rihito would gradually lure Yumigahama into his range, and when the moment arrives, he would use Razor's Edge. After this moment, Yumigahama would be on the time limit because he wouldn't be able to stop the bleeding. In conclusion, Yumigahama would win against Asura Rihito, but would lose against Omega Rihito. Nezu Masami is a delinquent, a furry, and the leader of a notorious biker gang. His most striking attribute is his abnormally tall build, and that's really it. If Yumigahama were to face the delinquent, build wouldn't be a deciding factor, but technique would. Since Yumigahama has more unique techniques than Masami, he would ultimately win, whether that be in the first few exchanges or in a long drawn-out battle. Yumigahama defeats the discount Mickey Mouse. Hikaru Yoshinari is a thickly built fisherman with zero martial arts experience, but a handful of useful techniques. Yoshinari has applied the fish processing principle of Ikijimi to combat, in which he lands a precise blow to his opponent's spine to cause momentary blackout. Yoshinari also has enhanced trunk muscles like that of Adam Dudley, and after spending many years on the open seas, his sense of balance has adapted to turbulent ocean currents. Although he cannot utilize this extreme sense of balance on land, if Yoshinari is struck on the head and his brain is jostled, he will quote-unquote return to the seas. If Yumigahama faced off against this pirate, their build would be equivalent, and in an upright battle, Yumigahama would have the advantage until Yoshinari lands any strike to the spine. At this moment, the tides would favor Hikaru Yoshinari, as he could take the opportunity to land heavy blows on him. If Yumigahama managed to jostle Yoshinari's brain, or Yoshinari willingly took a strike to the head, Yumigahama would be in even deeper trouble. Yumigahama loses to the fisherman. The athlete who turned his back on his own sport, Kyozan Takeru, is a sumo wrestler who can take a beating and dish out one as well. His slaps are great for dealing damage and pushing his opponents to the edge. As unusual as it is, Kyozan Takeru can launch a very powerful kick with his legs, and after taking a low posture, he can dash at his opponent with incredible speed. His only weakness is his limited stamina. If Kyozan faced Yumigahama, he would not be given the range that he wants, and Kyozan would advance against him with his slaps. Yumigahama would survive the onslaught and fire back after Kyozan had grown tired. After a small amount of provocation from Yumigahama, Kyozan would get angry enough to utilize his kick. This kick was able to knock Sekibayashi Jun unconscious, one of the toughest fighters in the series. If I were willing to guess, this kick would knock Yumigahama out as well. Even considering Omega Kyozan, who started to devote his life to sumo, this version of his character wouldn't utilize such disproportionate techniques, but would improve upon sumo and solely rely on that. If this version of Kyozan gets mad or is pushed to an extreme, he would just utilize his low stance and lift Yumigahama anyway. So in that case, Yumigahama loses to both the false and the true sumo wrestler. A practitioner of an extremely ancient form of Chinese martial arts, Nikaido Ren of the Heavenly Wolf Fist is a somewhat capable combatant, and more so an exhibitionist. His Heavenly Wolf Fist is a form of hypnosis that redirects his opponent's attention, opening them up for a single strike. Against high-level fighters it has seemed to work, therefore it would work against Yumigahama. But the strike itself lacks power, and due to Yumigahama's build, it wouldn't take him out. The only advantage Nikaido has is his speed, but he can't dodge Yumigahama's strikes forever, and will inevitably get caught. Yumigahama defeats the Heavenly Wolf. The actor from the underground, the Grand Imitator is a fighter who copies the techniques of others and utilizes them against his opponents. There are 3 caveats with this strategy. 1. He cannot copy the physical powers of other fighters, so no removal and no razor's edge. 2. The power of a technique scales to Takeyuki's physique. And 3. He cannot copy techniques instantly and requires 2 hours to do so. If Yumigahama isn't informed about this bluff, then he would proceed with caution against this strange fighter. The one thing that would remain absolute is that Yumigahama would win as a striker. By virtue of Takeyuki's ability, he is a jack of all trades, master of none sort of character. If he were to imitate the movements of a fellow striker, it would pale in comparison to the real deal because he doesn't have the experience or talent for it, whereas Yumigahama does. So, Yumigahama defeats the Christian Bale ripoff. Although not much of a sportsman, he is certainly a very interesting doctor with very notable attributes. Hajime is unable to feel any pain and is able to utilize an old Chinese medical practice known as Chinna, where essentially Hajime attacks an opponent's acupuncture points to neutralize them. However, this won't work on opponents who are thick. Apart from this, he has augmented his body in many ways by performing surgery on himself. For example, he carved out a blade from his own femur and inserted it into both of his arms that extend out of his wrist. Another weapon he can utilize are his heels. Through some unknown procedure, he is able to release high-pressure gas from his heels to launch himself forward. This gas is also filled with deadly viruses that take host in his bloodstream. Hajime is safe from these viruses because he is built different. If in the moment he dies, he can be reanimated due to other gizmos he has put into his body. If Yumigahama was sent into a fight with this biological Iron Man, he was obviously set up and is about to die for his crimes. Yumigahama loses. Another fan favorite, and also a member of the Four Idiots, Kaneda Suikichi is the most level-headed of the bunch, but the physically weakest. This limitation is best supplemented by techniques and keen foresight. Suikichi is a practitioner of the Kuzan style, a martial art adapted towards combats with armor and weapons that revolves around disrupting an opponent's balance with throws and dealing the final blow with a weapon. Although unsuited towards modern-day combat, paired with his expert foresight, it becomes a threat to be reckoned with. Although the only weakness to his strategy is that it takes a moment for Suikichi to analyze the pattern of his opponent. If Yumigahama faced Suikichi, there's no guarantee that he would be able to survive before he can analyze his opponent. Due to his weak build, he couldn't survive many strikes from Yumigahama before tapping out. If Suikichi survived, throwing Yumigahama off balance wouldn't guarantee Suikichi's victory. He would have to dislocate one of his arms, but judging off Yumigahama's build, Suikichi would need a lot more power to do that. Yumigahama defeats the Giant Killer. Another fan favorite and the leader of the Four Idiots, Okubo Naoya, is this universe's king of MMA. Okubo is a very well balanced fighter with great grappling and strikes to match. His main strategy is to alternate between throws, blows, locks, and holds. If his opponent wanted Okubo tied to the ground, he would respond with blows, and if his opponent wanted an upright battle, he would respond with grappling. This would be a challenge for Yumigahama, who isn't great at grappling but only good at striking. The only thing Okubo would need to do is to rely on his wrestling experience to win without needing to alternate between techniques. Yumigahama gets slammed with energy to spare. Yumigahama is woefully mediocre and hardly a representation of real-world combat sports. Except for facial expressions, he is nothing like Fabricio Werdum. Yumigahama has too many exploitable weaknesses and is orientated around a single form of combat that has nothing to do with Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai. Another telling sign of his lack of clout is his rivalry with Jose. Of what we know of Purgatory so far, Jose is on the lower spectrum of A-list gladiators, and Yumigahama, a fan of Metsudo, a title with so much prestige, is screwing around with a pro wrestler, and not even the best one at that. Judging from his interaction in the story and his lackluster record, he is even close to the top of Purgatory at all. However, if Yumigahama truly wanted to contend with some of the strongest people in the series, he should follow the 3 pillars of power introduced by Aokenji. What the karate chairman advised is to improve upon one's base and introduce 2 aces to one's arsenal. Yumigahama's main basis for combat is Kamijo spearmanship. He should improve upon this by performing parcel training. This would ensure his strikes will have more lethality and would make Yumigahama less susceptible to getting his arms broken. Along with this, Yumigahama needs a signature technique which utilizes his raw power to its fullest. Since Yumigahama would keep his distance with Kamijo spearmanship, he needs a signature that also has a significant amount of range, but also utilizes all of his raw power. For this, a kick is necessary. Although there are many different types of kicks, the most powerful ones are arguably from Muay Thai and Taekwondo. Muay Thai kicks utilize more leg mass and are thrown from a far distance, whereas a typical roundhouse utilizes torque. Considering Yumigahama's size, to truly bring out his power, he should utilize a Muay Thai roundhouse and mastered to the point that if thrown correctly, it would shatter through anyone's defense and run through their ribs like an axe. In line with Yumigahama's weapon-like combat, a technique like this would be dubbed the Grizzly Cleaver. Yumigahama's third pillar is strength, so in all likelihood be grappling, but since Yumigahama has far too much emphasis on striking already, it would be pointless against wrestling or jujutsu masters. So what Yumigahama really needs is a counter to be able to escape grappling altogether. When Muteba fought against Wakatsuki, Muteba was locked in this position by Wakatsuki and was able to get himself out by targeting Waka's acupuncture points. This falls in line with Yumigahama's partial training. If he strengthens his fingers, he would be strong enough to target these points. After Yumigahama finishes partial training, he should be learning acupuncture while mastering his Grizzly Cleaver at the same time. Although learning any of these things is difficult, Yumigahama is in good graces with Toyoda Idemitsu, and would be able to find the best resources on these subjects. With this new arsenal of his, Yumigahama would become a notable striker who sacrificed options for effective strategies that best synergize with his gimmick. This version would be a lot more difficult to take down and would definitely live up to the title of Fang of Mitsudo. However, as it stands now, Yumigahama is just a minor stepping stone for the Kengen Association. Hi, it's the cyborg whale named after Italian cheese and a dessert item. If you like content like this, please subscribe. I will be doing Muteba Gizinga next. But until then, have a good day.